Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time. So the Daily Aus' audience tell us consistently that mental health supports and renting are the top concerns for them. But based on this budget, not much appears to be changing in those areas. So what is in the budget for young people?
Well, there's an enormous amount in the budget for young people. Firstly, of course, the further cutting of HECS debts, 20%. Wiped out if we're elected to office, and that will kick in July. It comes on top of the $3 billion we've already reduced student debt by. On mental health, we have increased support as well. What we're doing is having these Medicare mental health centres where people can go in, get that mental health support that they need for free. They just need their Medicare card. We've funded in excess of 60. There's more than 30 of those centres are open right around Australia as well, providing that support. And in addition to that, of course, we've had a 45% increase in rental assistance. That has made a substantial difference. And for young Australians who are at school and the future young Australians to come, I think the agreement that was signed right here in this space this week with Queensland, which now brings every state and territory into the Better and Fairer Schools funding agreement that was identified more than a decade ago. But what this will do is an additional $16.5 billion from the Commonwealth, as well as additional funding from state and territory governments to make sure that every student in every public school gets the funding that they deserve and they need.
I just want to focus on some of the other cost of living measures that was in this budget. So that includes the tax cuts for all taxpayers and also the energy bill relief, which will be for all households, including those who might be on higher incomes. Do you think you should have focused on prioritising those who are doing it toughest at the moment? And targeting that support of cost of living?
Well, that's precisely what you do when you have universality. So that if you look at the tax cuts, they're aimed at people on that lower rate in particular will benefit in terms of the proportion, the average tax that they pay. By lowering that first rate that kicks in once you get past the tax-free threshold up to $45,000 from 16 cents to 15 and then to 14, that will particularly benefit low-income earners. It will benefit part-time workers, people who are students working their way through university or TAFE. It will make a difference for them. You can't, when you're changing the tax scales, you can't change the first marginal tax rate and then change it at the top end or not see that flow through. But we deliberately have targeted those low and middle income earners, which will mean that for average Australians will benefit because it's a top up from the tax cuts that began this year to the tune of $2,500 extra dollars in people's pockets.
You could change those tax brackets though, so they could increase according to a measure like inflation or the wage price index. Would you consider adjusting the tax brackets?
Well, we are adjusting them.
Would you adjust them further?
We're adjusting them down is what we're doing. What we did through our tax changes was take $4,500 of legislative tax cuts that I was going to receive less and redistributed that to low and middle income earners. And they're the changes that we put through. The opposition screamed blue murder about those changes, said that they'd oppose them, said they'd roll them back, then said we should have an election.
Parliament.
Well, they did what they said they wouldn't do, and eventually they passed the parliament because they had support from the crossbenchers as well. And in the end, they went through unanimously.
I just want to zoom out on the budget more broadly. We're heading into a $27 billion deficit this year, and the deficits are growing. And compared to last year's budget, they're actually estimated to be even deeper down the track. Who's going to be paying off this government debt?
Well, what we have done is produce, of course, 2 budget surpluses, the first time that has happened in decades. We inherited a $78 billion deficit when we came to office. We turned that into a $22 billion surplus and then followed it up with another $15 billion surplus. The deficit, which we announced last night, $27 billion, is half of what was anticipated just 3 years ago under the coalition. So what we have done is we've made over almost $100 billion of savings. We have reduced debt by around about $180 billion. And going forward, the budget bottom line is $207 billion better than the one that we inherited.
But compared to last year's predictions were actually a lot rosier than what we saw last night, Prime Minister.
Well, if you look at the mid-year economic forecast, they've actually shown an improvement, and that was just in December. What we've managed to do is to get inflation down to 2.4%, and unlike what a whole lot of economists would say, which was to get inflation down, you've got to have unemployment rising, you've got to really put the brakes on and leave people behind. Now, that's not the Labor way. That's not a way that I support. So we've managed to get inflation down whilst we've provided cost of living relief, not just tax cuts, not just energy bill relief, but cheaper medicines that have benefited Australians as well. Free TAFE, all of these measures making a difference. Cheaper childcare, $2,700 saved on childcare, whilst we've created 1.1 million jobs. More jobs have been created since I've been Prime Minister than at any term in Australian history over the last 125 years. And our unemployment rate on average is lower than it has been. All of these measures are combining so that real wages are increasing, and that has particularly benefited young Australians.
So just on climate change, the budget showed us last night that after ex-tropical cyclone Alfred, Australia is expected to pay $13.5 billion in natural disaster repair, but we didn't see any significant investments into cutting emissions or any major climate announcements. Is there a disconnect between the government's climate priorities and spending measures?
Not at all. We've got in place the safeguard mechanism, the capacity investment scheme that are driving investment in renewables. What we are seeing with the investment that we have in renewables, and to take one measure that we had in last night's budget, $3 billion for green metals. If we can produce green aluminium and green steel in Australia, driven by green hydrogen powered by solar and renewables, providing the green hydrogen that replaces coal in that system, then you have an enormous benefit going forward for reducing our emissions as well as supporting Australian jobs.
But those production tax credits are going to continue into 2036. Based on the government's own official figures, you're not on track to meet the 43% reduction target on 2005 levels by 2030.
You bet we are. You bet we're on track.
42.6 Prime Minister.
You bet we're on track. We are very confident that what the measures that we have in place already have us at 42.6, but what you are seeing is technology increasing. One of the things...
So we will hit 43% by 2030.
Absolutely. The development of new industries like green or hydrogen mean that if we seize the opportunities which are there, not only can we drive our emissions down, we can support jobs, we can support industries, including new industries, which will open up.
What do you say to those people who want to see the government going further and faster on cutting emissions?
That we're going as fast as we can whilst being responsible. We want to make sure that we continue to build community support. We want to make sure we have energy security. I see climate change as something that must go through all of our policies that we put forward, and we have, of course, the motor vehicle emissions standards, that fuel standards that were talked about for a long period of time. It's taken my government to get those fuel standards in place.
Just finally, Prime Minister, Just want you to picture a student that's heading to class today, maybe 19 or 20 years old, who's not feeling too optimistic about the future of this country. What do you want them to know?
I want them to know that Australia has a great future if we seize the opportunities. There's no country in the world you'd rather be than Australia, where we're located in the fastest growing region of the world in human history. That presents the opportunity for us to be a renewable energy superpower. We need to compete in that region by how smart we are, which is why it's good if they're going to university or doing a TAFE course. We need to make sure that we value that. Our industrial relations policies are making sure that they'll be properly paid. We want an economy that works for people, not the other way around. And that was a focus of our budget last night. It's a focus of my government in our first term, and it will be an even stronger focus in our second term.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, thank you so much for joining the Daily Aus in your courtyard.
Yeah, thanks very much.